All right, good morning, everybody. Hey, looks like we're pretty much filled up, so I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar. It is the second in our Lawn Care in the 21st Century series. Today we're going to talk about what we're calling the changing face of organics. And before I get started, just a couple of the regular housekeeping items. Obviously, this is live, and if you were on last week's webinar, you know what can happen when things are live. Sometimes we had a technical difficulty towards the end, but that's all right. Can everybody hear me okay? Before I keep going here? All right. Good. Thanks. Okay, so as usual, as normal, guys, and I know that there are quite a few people who are on today that have been on previous ones, I encourage you to ask questions, type them into the console of the GoToMeeting pane there up on the screen anytime. I may or may not stop and answer them, but that it shouldn't prevent you from actually go ahead and typing things in. You know, we might be able to get to them. It might be topical, it might not be, but if I ignore it, it might mean I'll get to it later. It might mean that I don't think it fits in specifically. But what we're going to do today also, and I should bring it up and mention it now, this webinar kind of, as I wrote it, took on a couple of different turns as I went. Initially, when I wanted to do something about organics, I kind of wanted to drill it down specifically to the niche, to our legitimate and specific niche, which is really, pretty conservative, well-regulated organics with very few opportunities to kind of move away from some of the standards. And as I kept going, I ended up kind of taking a more point of view from sort of an industry perspective, a lawn care service industry perspective, and not just necessarily an organic lawn care industry perspective. And maybe that's sort of part of the issue, is that there shouldn't be different perspectives. We're all really in the same industry, and we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And maybe because there's so many labels, it might not be as healthy as we'd like it to be. So the reason I bring that up is because I'll probably go for about an hour talking about the agenda and the topic itself. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, I'm not completely sure. But I don't want to talk specifically about B-Safe products. Obviously, I work at B-Safe Lawns, and we kind of deal with organics. But I don't want to make that a part of the actual content of the webinar. However, towards the end, when we're finished, if we want to do some more specific questions and answers, we can hang around all day if you want. So if you have specific questions or interests about more specific type things, let's wait till the end to do it, and we can talk all day long if you want to. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Most of you guys know who I am. My name's Tom Kelly. I've been in the lawn care business for quite a while. Today we're going to talk about the changing face of organics, and we'll talk about how an industry has begun to embrace a new way to create healthy lawns. If you want to see a replay of this, I'm recording it, and just like last week's, we'll run a replay on Monday at 3 o'clock. So if you want to register for it again, or you want somebody in your business or somebody you know to watch it, you have to go and register for it again. It's not just going to be played. You have to sign up for it. So go to this website, dealer.bsafelawns.com/blog. If you just go to bsafelawns.com and then find your way around to the dealer section, you'll find the registration links. There's also a recorded version of last week's webinar, which was Lawn Care Business 101, which went pretty good. We had a lot of people on and a lot of good feedback for it. You'll also be able to register for next week's, which is on January 24th, and we're going to do a session about marketing, how you as a small or mid-sized company can build a marketing plan that kind of replicates, the bigger companies sort of approach. Just because you're much smaller than the big corporate companies doesn't mean you can't put together a marketing campaign and build sales processes that look like theirs. in a good way. Sometimes we're critical of the way they make sales, but in a good way. It's all about trying to grow your business. So if you want to register for those things, go to the Be Safe Lawn site and find your way to the dealer section. For those of you who don't know me that well, let me just give you a little bit rundown about what I do here. And I got into lawn care when I was a kid, a long time ago. At Barefoot Grass Lawn Service, I like putting that up here because you run into some barefoot people every once in a while. I've worked there in the early 90s. Went on to start a company called Lawn Dog. Barefoot Grass is so old you can't even find a logo on the internet. Like if you search for Barefoot Grass, it was before the internet. How funny is that? There's never a Barefoot website or anything. So it's hard to find a Barefoot Grass logo. From 96 to 2009, I owned and operated a company called the Lawn Dog in the Northeast. Lawn Dog still exists today. It is doing really well. We sold it to a private equity group in 2009. I went on to start Fire Valley Organics, and from there I teamed up with a couple of other people and launched Be Safe Lawns. I worked to develop my lawn quote, and our most recent and pretty exciting venture is the Organic Lawn Care Institute, which is a New Hampshire vocational school, a legitimate, certified post-secondary vocational school for people who want to come and learn more about how to implement organics in their business or in their homes, or if they're groundskeepers. That's going pretty well. If you want to follow along with any of the things that kind of have to do with any of this stuff, we have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. It's Facebook. Page is The Lawntrepreneurs, and on Twitter it's just Lawntrepreneurs. We call it our lawn care reality show here. We were also in Entrepreneur Magazine last summer as a disruptor in the industry, which we always bring this up because it's pretty cool. Entrepreneur does an annual issue about industry disruptors, and they pick about 5 or 6 people who are doing things different in their industry and kind of pushing the envelope, and we were mentioning that, and that's pretty good. It was last summer. We're always proud to bring that one up. So today, what we're going to try to talk about, and we're going to try to talk about from sort of a broad perspective, what is organic lawn care? How broad of a question is that? We all seem to want to fight about it a lot. What does that mean? What does organic lawn care mean? Does that mean you never use any chemicals? Does it mean you're building organic matter in the soil? Does it mean, weeds are okay? What exactly constitutes and makes up acceptable practices with organics? And there really isn't any standard. There's no real universally accepted or lawful standards for what you can or cannot use when you're going to call something organic lawn care, and that creates issues, no doubt about it, from lots of different perspectives, from the chemical lawn care company to the niche organic lawn care company. How about to the property manager who's trying to hire somebody to do organics? There are so many states and rules and regulations. I was just talking to one of our Be Safe guys this morning, actually just not that long ago, Mike Callahan, who's in Rochester, New York. And New York has legislation that does not allow the use of pesticides on playing fields in schools. So who makes up those rules? What is the standard? What can Mike use and what can he not use when he's putting together a bid? He was doing a bid for athletic fields not in Rochester, but a town right outside Rochester, I forget. It gets confusing. It really does. And without a universal set of standards, it's difficult to navigate your way around a little bit. So as a result of those kind of issues and that lack of official standard, we have to depend on experts to tell us what's okay and what's not. And we have to take the advice of the people we trust, and it's a matter of interpretation sometimes, right? So one person or one group says you can use this, one group says you can't use this, one expert says, oh, this is completely acceptable, you can use this in your organic program, while on a completely different plane, somebody who might be more conservative says there's no way you can use that product in an organic program, and we're all over the place. So we need to depend on the advice and the standards sort of generated by experts in the field and the people that we trust. So today's presentation, what we're going to talk about the definition or trying to develop standards for organics from an industry perspective, from a lawn guy perspective, from a lawn company owner perspective. We're not going to talk about it from an advocacy perspective. Now, a lot of times that represents the two extremes, right? So there are the advocates who are, have their fist in the air, beating the drum about, never, spray another ounce of weed control ever again because it's terrible for the environment and terrible for your health. And people have different opinions on that. We need to do a better job from within the industry to develop what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so today we're going to talk about things from the industry perspective and not from the perspective of somebody trying to advocate for or against the use of certain products. I think that's important to mention here. How are we going to move on as an industry, not an organic industry, not a chemical industry, but as a lawn care industry into the next phase of acceptable practices and best practices? It is my opinion that right now as an industry, and again, when I say industry, I'm talking about everybody from the president of TruGreen down to the startup or 20 customer organic lawn care service company. I hate to throw everybody like that all together, but it's true. The lawn care industry is a group of companies that attempt to improve turf using inputs and make a living doing it. So I'm talking about from an industry. It's my opinion that as an industry, from both sides, we're not doing a good job trying to determine what's acceptable, what's not, what our best practices are. And as a result of that, it's having a negative impact on all of us from a perception standpoint, from a results standpoint, from ease of use, all the way right down to, people's expectations, customers' expectations. What are they signing up for? I think we're going down the wrong road with that, and it has a big impact on all of us. So let's start with kind of where this whole thing started, and organic agriculture. So when we talk about organic lawn care, it's kind of a spin-off of organic farming, right? And organic agriculture and organic living, whole foods, the organic lifestyle, people eating food that was grown or produced without the use of certain chemicals has grown in a big, big way in our lifetimes, right? And this is a pretty cool graph that I found that kind of documents the growth of certified organic operations. And again, we're talking about agriculture here. From 2002 to 2012, over the course of that period. And it looks like there's about 7,200 certified organic operations in the year 2002, and has grown massively to almost 18,000 certified organic operations or farms or producers in the United States. That's a massive, massive growth from over just a 10-year period. So for the most part, people's perception of organic lawn care is that it kind of coincides with organic agriculture. And to a certain extent, that's true, right? I mean, we're all trying to grow something. So I wanted to start with some of the standards and definitions of what makes something certified organic when it comes to agriculture. And I just took this right off a couple of quotes from literally from the United States Department of Agriculture website. So let's, as a baseline, we'll say the Organic Foods Production Act, enacted under Title 21 of the 1990 Farm Bill, served to establish uniform national standards for the production and handling of foods labeled as organic. The Act authorized the USDA National Organic Program to set national standards for the production, handling, processing of organically grown agricultural products. In addition, the program oversees mandatory certification of organic production. It also established the National Organic Standards Board, which advises the Secretary of Agriculture in setting standards upon which NOP is based. Producers who meet these standards set by the NOP may label their products as USDA certified organic. So what this did was create a universal standard that eliminates, at its core, basically what it does is it eliminates people from being able to call something organic. On the other hand, it allows people to label their stuff as organic, but sometimes more importantly, it sets a standard to prevent people from calling something organic. That's important to know. How do we define what organic food is? Organic food is produced by farmers who emphasize the use of renewable resources and the conservation of soil and water to enhance environmental quality for future generations. That's kind of touchy-feely for the USDA. I mean, that's sort of a theoretical statement. Organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products come from animals that are giving no antibiotics, no growth hormones. Organic food is produced without using most conventional pesticides, fertilizers made with synthetic ingredients, or sewage sludge. You hear that? Sewage sludge. Sewage sludge is not acceptable in organic agriculture. Before a product can be labeled as organic, a government-approved certifier inspects the farm where the food is grown to make sure the farmer is following all the rules necessary to meet the standards. Companies that handle or process the food must also be certified too. So again, USDA's definition of what organic is it sets standards as to what you can and can't do in the production of a certain product, of certain food. So that begs the question immediately, right off the bat. Is organic lawn care something that should fall under the same exact standards? Is it the same thing as organic agriculture, and should it be regulated the same way? When those standards were implemented by USDA, there was a large contingency of organic farmers who were way against it, very much against that certification process, because once the government becomes involved with telling what you can and cannot do, the standards are typically sort of lowered, right? So a lot of the old school organic farmers who had been doing something, the same way for a long time, once a standard was set for it, it basically allowed people to kind of manipulate those standards. So the question is, should organic lawn care follow the same standards as agriculture? Does anybody have a yes or no with that? Should it or shouldn't it? I'd be interested to know what the consensus is. Looks like it's all over the place. Lots of different answers. Sort of 50-50. That makes me a little nervous with where I'm going here. So let's move on. Why or why not? One of the most commonly cited reasons that the standard should be different is because grass is not food, right? You're not going to eat food, the grass. You're not growing the grass to package it and sell it for another person to eat. It's not an edible crop. You don't eat grass. You're not directly swallowing it. Yes, there are a couple of questions about, or a couple of comments about other grass, right? If it were edible grass, that might be different. Maggie, you are correct. But for the most part, we're not growing edible grass. It's interesting, just as a note here, when I asked that, lots of people chimed in, and the yeses and the nos are almost equal. So it's kind of an indication of what kind of crowd we have here. And at current, we have almost 100 people, so that's pretty cool. So the question is, should it be regulated the same way? The issue is that there are no standards. There is not an accepted or universal standard with what's an acceptable input to be able to call something organic. In agriculture, there's that label. When you see something that says USDA organic on it, you should be able to feel comfortable that that product was grown or produced or raised under the existing standards that the government has implemented. And it sets out to pretty much, provide comfort for you. Some awesome points continue to come in, which is very interesting to me. But so the question is, who sets those standards? Does nobody set them? Is it just a free-for-all? Is it sort of a supply and demand thing? Do we expect that the market will bear what the standards are going to be? That's a little bit of a slippery slope because not everybody is always going to be honest about everything, and that's an issue in our industry. Is it the service companies that set that standard? Do they tell you what's organic and what's acceptable and what they're going to use and whether it's okay or not? Is it the product suppliers that set those standards? Now, they're going to be a little bit sort of biased when it comes to certain things, I would think, depending on what perspective they're coming from. What basically it comes down to is that we need to kind of determine that we're going to depend on people or groups that have earned credibility to be able to set what those standards are. At least that's my feeling, right? You need to depend on people that you trust. Is it people with the credibility? Maybe the issue sometimes there is that people or organizations like to tell you about their credibility, right? Whether it's an association, that's right, Eric, and there are people typing things in about what that's supposed to be. The question, no, there isn't one universal association, but we'll talk about some of them that are. Sometimes the issue there is that it's not about earning credibility, it's about somebody telling they're credible. So when I set out to kind of do this, to write this webinar, I have my own sort of feelings on what's acceptable and what's not. But the two main things that come up across the country in terms of experts or in terms of people or organizations that we tend to trust to determine what these things are, there's Planet. How many people are members of Planet, the Professional Land Care Network? Some of you. And then there's NOFA. NOFA is a little bit more regional. NOFA is the Northeast Organic Farming Association. How many people are members of NOFA or are NOFA certified? Yep. Leah, you mentioned Oregon Tilt, and that is another one that I'm not going to talk about today, but yes, that's another sort of their standards are based on the NOFA standards, so they're sort of almost one and the same. Again, we've got a sort of more members of Planet than of NOFA, and that's accepted or understood because NOFA is smaller and more regional. So we're going to depend on Planet, which is Planet's huge. We're the Professional Land Care Network is an awesome organization that sort of advocates for the lawn and landscape industry, not just lawn care, but the green industry in general. So let's kind of start with them. The Professional Land Care Network bills themselves as the landscape industry's premier association. Most people are members of Planet. Most companies are members of Planet. They offer lots of help in regards to training and running your business, and they're just the standard for the National Trade Association, the most well-known, I think, probably the only one. Planet was formed when PLACO, which was the Professional Lawn Care Association, merged with ALCO, which was the landscaping, tons of questions coming in here. Makes me stutter. So when the Landscaper Association and the Lawn Care Association merged, which I guess was probably more than 10 years ago now. I remember I've been a member of Planet for a really long time. One gigantic trade association was formed, and that's Planet. So when I was looking to try to determine specifically what Planet's stance was on organics, and I already knew the answer to the question, but I wanted to kind of verify it, I ran into some really interesting things, and I want to talk about them a little bit. The National Trade Association of our entire industry has a couple of things out there that surprised me a little bit. But one thing I found was a story on NBC News a couple of years ago. Obviously, huge distribution, national, NBC. And I'm going to quote from it. Tom Delaney of the Professional Land Care Network, a national group that represents landscapers, tree care, and lawn care specialists. Now, this is entitled "Organic Lawn Care is More Than Just a Fad." That's from NBC News. I should have mentioned that. The national group that represents landscapers, tree care, and lawn care specialists said an increasing amount of shelf space is being given to organic lawn care products in major home and garden retailers, a reflection of increased interest, of course. But he cautions that consumers need to do their own research on what works best for them. It remains to be seen, quote, how satisfied customers are with the price and with the result, he said. Home remedies, you have to be careful with that stuff. I kind of gasped a little bit there. I don't know Tom personally. I think I've met him a couple times going back to the olden days, but I know of him. Very, very well respected, person in our industry. But the quote, "It remains to be seen how satisfied customers are with these, the price and the results." And then he says, "Home remedies, you have to be careful with that stuff." I'm not taking that out of context either. That's a little was a little concerning to me. So I kept going. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So I went to the Planet website to see if there's hopefully a little bit of a better understanding of what organic standards are beyond just, considering them home remedies. That was, I thought that had to be a mistake. Maybe it didn't make sense. So the lawn and landscape, this is from Planet's website. The lawn and landscape care industry uses pesticides to help limit the damage that can be caused by insects, weeds, and plant diseases. Insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides are used very selectively to protect the health of lawns, trees, and other living plants in urban, suburban environments. Fertilizers are used to provide much needed nutrition for landscape plants. That seems to make a fair amount of sense. I don't know if I agree with the very part of very selectively, but I'm on board still. It's very important to note that pesticides and fertilizers are not used primarily for aesthetic reasons. First and foremost, they're tools that help ensure a healthy landscape. Furthermore, their use helps protect customers' properties as valuable, ecologically important areas. Residential landscapes are tremendous economic assets as well as vital green spaces that enhance our community's beauty and overall healthy state. Again, okay, that seems to make a lot of sense. I'm taken aback by the first sentence. It's very important to note that pesticides and fertilizers are not used for aesthetic reasons. Does anybody get what that might be? I mean, if they're not using pesticides for aesthetic reasons, what are we using them for? Right? Lots of opinions on that. Yeah, right. Good point. Aesthetics are what create economic assets and vital green spaces. That's sort of how you define what a vital green space is, right? Aesthetics. If something, yeah. Let's not get stuck on that. I want to move on. One of the the coolest things that Planet does, and I haven't gone to this in a couple of years because my opinion on it has changed a little bit, but Legislative Day on the Hill. Has anybody ever been to Legislative Day on the Hill, or do you know what I'm talking about? Hans, he's talking about pesticides in general, not just organic pesticides. When Planet's talking about pesticides, they're talking about everything, not just organic pesticides. So Legislative Day on the Hill is awesome. I really, for those of you who haven't been or you don't know what it is, it's a publicity stunt for Planet, but it's cool where if you're a member of Planet, everybody goes down to Arlington National Cemetery and everybody gets together and does a gigantic application of lime on Arlington National Cemetery. It's one of those rare things where, it's kind of special. You know what I mean? It's hard to explain. It's very interesting to be there. There are funerals going on, there are processions, and it's kind of solemn. And if you've been to Arlington National Cemetery, it's certainly impressive, and I think it's a good thing that Planet does this kind of thing with the cemetery. What they use it for, though, is to be able to kind of get some attention for some of the legislative issues that they're trying to push through. So I haven't been for a long time, but they used to set up meetings with your legislators. So you'd meet with your senator or your congressperson to be able to tell them what's important to you in regards to the industry. So this was this particular document here was an issue briefing from last year's Legislative Day on the Hill. And obviously, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll quote a couple things. So they provide you with this information to prepare you for the way you're going to talk to your legislators. This one's about regulatory relief. And it quotes, pesticides are an important tool in maintaining green spaces and protecting people and property from pests, such as ticks, rodents that can carry disease. They're also used to control weeds that can exacerbate allergies. Right? So a little further down, unfortunately, some uses of pesticides are threatened by the burdensome Clean Water Act. and requirements in regards to permits. Further down, pesticide applications are also being limited by lawsuits related to the Endangered Species Act. So the point here is that you're supposed to go talk to your legislator and tell them that you're interested in helping or convincing them that we should spend more attention kind of backing these things off, that there are too many lawsuits in regards to the Endangered Species Act, that pesticides are being threatened by, interesting adjective here, a burdensome Clean Water Act requirement. So I started, as I continued to get through this, I was beginning to build a case that I was afraid I was going to find. So let's keep going. Hopefully I'm not making anybody too mad yet. Well, actually, the comments, Hillary, I'm kind of with you. I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm kind of with you. So we're trying to tell our legislators to back off on the regulation in regards to pesticides because they're burdened, the regulations are burdensome and clean water and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to ask you a question here, and I want you to type it in. Can you guys name 3 of the most commonly used pesticides in your lawn care program or in any chemical lawn care program? Give me 3 examples, some trade names. Not Roundup. Everybody's saying Roundup. Not Roundup. All right, yep. Okay. There they are. I'm going to go with Matt right away. Whoa, now they're all coming in like crazy. But so Matt, where did you go? I have to find you again. Oh boy, I lost it. Hold on. I like that kind of participation. I asked like 40 people type something in, but Matt Cameron, you win the prize. Dimension and Midacloprid. Those are the ones I wanted, and a bunch of other people also mentioned a couple too. Dimension and Merit. Those are probably the 2 most common, right? Everybody uses Dimension and Merit. So now I've got I'm setting this up for you guys. Bear with me here. So we've got Planet out there trying to tell our legislators that the pesticides that we most commonly use should kind of be left alone because of the burdensome, the burden as a result of the Clean Water Act and lawsuits related to the Endangered Species Act. Let's open up a label for Dimension, which most people assume is sort of harmless. Here's the label, the legal label for Dimension, which is a pre-emergent, sold like mad. Every lawn care service company uses either Dimension or Barricade or Pre-Em or some other version. A lot of times the active ingredient's different, but annual grassy weed pre-emergence. The label is the law. And let's go right down to environmental hazards right here. I lost my screen thing a little bit. So on the right over down, environmental hazards. This product is toxic to fish and highly toxic to other aquatic organisms, including oysters and shrimp. Drift and runoff from treated turf may be hazardous to aquatic organisms in water adjacent to treated areas. On the front page of the label, we're talking about a warning that warns us how toxic this product is to things in water. That damn burdensome Clean Water Act, right? How about Merit? For most of us, Merit has been probably the most commonly used pesticide on the planet, besides Roundup. The most, the pesticide that's kind of created the most issues too, because it's a neonicotinoid that's kind of under a little bit of scrutiny for colony collapse disorder. That's another webinar for another time. Let's go right down to environmental hazards of one of the most commonly used insecticides in the industry. Label is the law, right out front. This product is highly toxic to aquatic invertebrates. Do not apply directly to water or to areas where surface water is present or to intertidal areas below the mean high water mark. This product is highly toxic to bees exposed to direct treatment or residues on blooming crops or weeds. Do not apply this product to allow it to drift to blooming crops or weeds if bees are visiting the treatment area. This chemical demonstrates the properties and characteristics associated with chemicals detected in groundwater. The use of this chemical in areas where soils are permeable, particularly where the water table is shallow, may result in groundwater contamination. That burdensome Clean Water Act permit requirement. So I've kind of lost my my faith in having Planet determine what's acceptable. Anybody know who these guys are? I've lost my my console here. Hold on. Technical difficulty. Going back. Anybody know who those guys are? No, they're not mobsters. They're not, well, some would, they're not Exxon. Good guess. These are the lawyers for the tobacco industry back, what, 10 years ago? Remember when, oh, probably more than 10 years ago, when the lawyers for the tobacco industry were telling us that cigarettes weren't harmful. When I was putting this all together, this is what came to mind. Came to the top of my mind. So although I'm a huge fan of Planet, I think they do great things for our industry. When the executive director refers to organics as homemade remedies, and we talk about the burdensome Clean Water Act requirements, and on the front page of the most commonly used pesticides in the industry are warnings about how if the soil's permeable, we shouldn't use it because it might get in the groundwater. That pissed me off. So I'm not going to depend on them to determine it. And at this point, I want to tell you guys, if you're promoting your lawn care service as being environmentally responsible and you're using those products, I want you to stop because it's dishonest. And if you're promoting new sales to new customers that you are an environmentally responsible lawn care service company and you use those products that carry those warnings, do us all a favor and stop promoting it that way. It's not against the law to use them. It's not against the law to tell your customers that you're using those products to deal with those things. I don't like the way that many people tell their potential customers that they're environmentally responsible when on the front page of labels of the products they're using, it basically says in big letters, this isn't environmentally responsible. So my point here is to call out Planet and say, I'm not going to depend on you to determine what I can and can't use, because obviously you're a little bit leaning towards a certain direction. I'm eliminating Planet to tell me what I can do. So let's talk about NOFA. NOFA is the standards that I use, and I'm trying to keep BSafe out of this. NOFA is the standards that I use to determine what's acceptable in my organic lawn care program, what we tell our applicators to use, how they do it, and I'm a supporter of NOFA. I'm absolutely a supporter of NOFA, but they represent the opposite extreme from what we've determined sort of Planet to be. And again, I want to remind you that I'm talking from an industry standpoint here, a lawn care industry standpoint. I'm not just talking about organic lawn care. I'm not just talking about chemical lawn care. I'm trying to talk about the good and the benefit of the lawn care industry as a whole, not one particular niche. So let's talk about NOFA for a little bit. NOFA is the Northeast Organic Farming Association. They absolutely have some very, very good standards. They wrote a book called The Standards for Organic Land Care. Many of us depend specifically on these standards to determine what we can and can't use. I have a copy on my desk. I refer to it a lot. But in my opinion, this also has some issues. There are some issues with this particular group of standards from an industry perspective. And if you think I was making people mad about Planet, stand by for this. While the NOFA standards serve as the only official and somewhat accepted group of standards, I think there's several issues of the way they apply to the industry as themselves as well. The standards, for the most part, were written by a group of people with little or no experience in professional lawn care, mostly pioneered by organic farmers. Asterisk, enormous asterisk here, enormous asterisk, because I'm not saying that the standards were written by people who don't know what they're talking about, because they were written by people who know what they're talking about more than any of us, or more than myself at a lot of times. But they were written by, and Chip comes to mind. We all know Chip. Chip is I've said it a million times, my mentor, and somebody who's I depend on for advice on a lot of things. He had a lot to do with standards and some very, very, very smart people. But I don't think they took into consideration sort of the scalability of what the lawn care industry kind of revolves around. So although they're written with great intentions in mind, there are many instances where they don't necessarily translate well to the guy who's out on the road trying to do 30 lawns a day, right? To what is the majority of the lawn care industry. And again, I know that there are some very smart people who wrote the standards, some people in the lawn care industry. I'm talking more about the large, scalable lawn care business in general. They're exceptionally stringent and conservative with the products that are available for use. This is the far extreme of the spectrum, and they're a set of standards that we depend on for our particular niche. And as the niche continues to grow, that's a good thing. As a result, though, most certified applicators haven't been able to implement them on a large or meaningful scale. Asterisk again. Very important, very good standards that I follow myself, but they've struggled to find their way into the mainstream of organic lawn, of lawn care in general, the lawn care industry, not necessarily the niche organic lawn care industry. A lot of people have begun to interpret them as being more anti-lawn care than anti-chemical lawn care, and I hear that more and more, and I think that that's not necessarily a good thing either. So while many small companies and local companies have been able to successfully implement these standards, I can't find any mid-size or larger lawn care service who's able to kind of turn them into a scalable type situation. If anybody can prove me wrong, please do. So while it's been important to help develop that niche and set the baseline standards for what we're doing, they don't have a huge impact on the industry as a whole. And again, I'm throwing that asterisk out there. That's why at the beginning of today's presentation, I wanted you to know that I'm talking about the industry, not specifically the organic lawn care industry. They're very, very difficult to implement on a large scale. So I had a conversation with, just last night, I was texting somebody, a B-Safe applicator. This slide made it into the presentation this morning and then got taken out of the presentation and put back in. So yeah, it's a questionable move here. And I kind of quoted this directly from the text. We were talking about advocacy and how perhaps some of the really, really super conservative standards could potentially be construed as being a little bit misguided when we're talking about the greater good, the bigger whole. And he said, Tom, in terms of advocacy, what really should we be doing? And he says, should we have 30 small companies going out on 59 lawns, spending a lot of money and losing sleep because of complaints? Or should we focus our energy on having 3,000 contractors substitute four full rounds to organic? Let's see, 50 pallets or 45,000 metric tons. And he says, no, wait, I was wrong, 31, maybe I should have taken that part. What his point was that he was one of those smaller companies doing everything he possibly could to implement these standards, but he wasn't able to scale them up. This is a big company, too. This is a really big company who had struggled thinking that he could take these standards, apply it to all of his companies, and make all of his customers and make it work. So when it comes to the scalable, large lawn care industry, these standards are a little bit unrealistic and very difficult to implement with scalability. While there's a growing niche, and many, many, many of us many companies, including many of our BeSafe applicators, have built very strong businesses on that niche. The national consumer base isn't ready yet to implement or to kind of accept these standards. My point here is that I wanted to take the two extremes. I wanted to kind of demonstrate what was acceptable with the two extremes. And the vast majority of homeowners, and most of you really kind of get this, they want to have their cake and eat it too when it comes to organic lawn care. Sometimes it's more about what we say and less about what we actually do, we meaning consumers, because everybody wants to be organic until they have too many dandelions. And yes, there is that niche that's okay with it, or everybody's organic until the lawn isn't quite green enough. And that is a little bit of a contradiction that exists in there, and it's sort of the whole food crowd. As an industry, guys, we need to deal with this. Where do we go from here? Once we've kind of acknowledged that there's a very strong foundation and baseline for these particular standards, and unfortunately we acknowledge that our National Trade Association isn't going to lead us down the right road with that, I hope they change. I hope that somebody gets involved with that can, tell Tom that organics aren't homemade, do-it-yourself, products, like trying to kill ants with brown water. This is an entire industry and a movement to be able to change the way we treat lawns. As an industry, we need to develop a set of standards that are realistic from an agronomic and profitability standpoint, somewhere in the middle. So we're not talking about organic lawn care. We're not talking about chemical lawn care. We're going to talk about optimized lawn care. So what's optimized lawn care? And what's acceptable with this sort of new version of a reduced input type situation? So one, reduction with a means to an elimination of chemical inputs must be far and away the greatest priority. Keyword is reduction here. Let's start with reducing with a means to eliminate. But sometimes when we jump directly to eliminate, we alienate people because of stereotypes. We want to reduce with a means to eliminate. When we come in immediately and say, I'll never use that horrible, terrible, cancer-causing, environmentally destroying product, unfortunately, guys, most of the consumer base isn't quite ready to hear that yet. Two, the emphasis on business profitability has to come before our desire to advocate for the elimination of chemical inputs. I know that I can hear lots of people, and I've closed the questions because they were distracting me, and there were hundreds of them coming through. So this one's going to tick some of you guys off. But the emphasis on business profitability has to come before the desire to advocate for elimination of chemical inputs. If you don't run a good business, it doesn't matter what the hell you're doing. If you're not going to be able to make money and employ people and get more customers, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. So number three, we must immediately reduce all chemical fertilizer inputs by half. And we must commit to constantly strive to reduce those inputs even further. I want to tell you again, I'm not talking about the niche. I'm talking about the industry. As the niche market, you can do it right away. But as an industry, we have to reduce all of our fertilizer inputs by 50% now. And we have to constantly strive to reduce those inputs even further. Number four, we have to completely eliminate the use of slow-release fertilizers and chlorine. Has anybody looked at their label on their fertilizer lately and seen how much % chlorine is in there? It's as a result of the potassium and certain types of potassium. Five, we must immediately cease and desist the use of blanket applications of preventative control products. Preventative control products. There was a line in one of the things I was reading about how it was a Planet piece, I don't know if I talked about it, but how pesticides are used sparingly. And an enormous effort is put into using those products sparingly. Well, round one on every lawn across the country is a chemical pre-emergent that isn't exactly used sparingly. We need to eliminate the use of preventative chemical control products now, unless they are EPA exempt or certified organic by a reputable certification company. 6, we must allow one rescue treatment per year in each of the following non-preventative chemical inputs. This is where we need to bend the rules a little bit as an industry, not as a niche, but as an industry, to make it a little bit more acceptable for the general consumer base to accept what we're trying to do. So a rescue treatment, and NOFA has developed great standards on what determines what those rescue treatments are, but they're a little bit strict on how we kind of implement them. But when a customer has a lot of weeds and they say, Tom, spray my weeds with that pesticide, if you don't spray them, I'm going to cancel. You spray them every single time. You do not let that customer cancel. So broadleaf weed control, post-emergent grassy weed control, surface insect control if necessary, subsurface insect control if necessary. A rescue treatment, if you're in danger of losing a customer, has to be acceptable. We must do everything possible to utilize new science to optimize existing agricultural, I spelled agricultural wrong, resources that exist in the environment. I'm talking about biology. Things that will help us fix nitrogen that allows us to reduce nitrogen. Things that help us solubilize phosphorus to help us reduce phosphorus. Things that help us reduce the impact of oleochemicals created by some of the weeds that take over, for instance, crabgrass. From that point, you guys, as an industry, and I know it's a big old pipe dream here, but from optimized lawn care will come truly organic lawn care, and the niche becomes the mainstream. The niche will become the mainstream, and that's as a result of a lot of the work that the niche market is doing. And if we can have any sort of impact or influence on the larger lawn care industry, we reduce our inputs and implement those policies and procedures, the niche becomes the mainstream. What are the 5 principles of optimized lawn care? 1, encourage, amplify, and introduce beneficial soil biology. Number 1, introduce, amplify, and encourage beneficial soil biology. 2, utilize biostimulation as a core input and process. Biostimulants help reduce stress in plants, and stress is what causes plants to look bad. 3, and this one drives me nuts, fertilize when it's appropriate. When it's appropriate is determined by genetic growth habits of turf, not all the time. It doesn't make sense to throw fertilizer around all day, all year long. From the minute the soil defrosts, or even in some cases before the soil defrosts, until the end of the year when the soil freezes again. I'm talking in the north. If it's cool season turf, fertilize when it wants to be fertilized, which is the spring and the fall. If it's warm season turf, fertilize in the summer when it wants to be fertilized and grow. Follow the genetic sort of signifiers of the plant. Understand the chemical-free control methods, including improved cultural practices, and utilize improved organic pesticides. So understand the chemical-free control methods, including improved cultural practices, will help you minimize and reduce the things we're talking about. You have to be able to mow the lawn right and water the lawn right and always talk about those sort of things. And you need to educate, commit, and perpetuate these principles, which means it's up to you to talk to homeowners and other services and everybody else that this is how you think it should be done. This is my new favorite quote as of late. And I got on my soapbox for a little bit there, guys. Forgive me. And I ignored your questions. But sometimes I get fired up about this, right? And I want you to get fired up about it too. And I want to be realistic about things. And we can talk about it all day long. And as much as I dislike, I think, Woody Allen movies, this is my favorite quote recently, especially when I'm talking to Be Safe people. 80% of success is just showing up. Doesn't do any good if all we do is talk about it. Just try to do one thing. Take one step. Implement one different process, one different procedure. Implement one change, and 80% of that success will happen. If you don't do anything, nothing will happen. 80% of success is just showing up. So one thing that we didn't cover much of was specifics in regards to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, right? And that's why I kind of changed, when I set out to do this particular webinar, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, but it kind of morphed on me. So as what are we at? We're at an hour. That was a full hour-long rant, and thank you for bearing with me. And if I irritated some of you, I'm sorry. Hopefully I made a little bit of an influence. I'm going to take a breath and read some of these questions, but I'd like you to ask any questions you want that might be more specific, right? That might be more specific to certain inputs. Most of the questions are about how do I start? 80% is just showing up, right? Awesome. Awesome questions. How do I start? You start by starting. That's sort of a cop-out answer, but make a commitment to begin to do something. You know, read more about what some of the standards are. Read more about what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and then form your own judgments and try to implement some of these things in some of your programs. What's the best way to educate a customer on why they should use organics? That's the 5th principle, right? Educate all the time. You kind of have to build some confidence. That'd be my first suggestion, is be able to speak to some of these things, learn about them, understand how they work and how you can implement them. Be able to confidently convey the message to people. Once you're able to confidently convey the message, people respect the things that you're saying. So learn more. Learn as much as you possibly can. I asked for questions, and I got an explosion of questions here, which is good. John Close, one word followed by one question mark, something that I feel kind of strongly about. John Close writes, biosolids, question mark. I'm going to answer with an exclamation point. No. No way. Biosolids is one way that many of those companies, and I tried to call them out a little bit, the environmentally friendly lawn care service companies use biosolids. Biosolids is recycled, reconstituted soil sludge, sewer sludge. And there are all kinds of reasons why that's not acceptable, from what's in it, from heavy metals. The biggest issue with biosolids right now is, believe it or not, prescription drugs being flushed down the toilet. Everybody trying to dispose of prescription drugs by putting them in the septic or in the sewer. And for the most part, they are not processed out during the procedure to kind of turn human feces into fertilizer. Those prescriptions and the active ingredients in those prescriptions remain. And for the vast majority of people don't want their kids playing on grass that has, antidepressants available to them. A lot of questions about compost tea all day long. Compost tea is that first principle. And one of the main ways that you're going to reduce inputs. Compost tea is a great way to introduce microbiology into your program. There are different ways to do it. You can learn about how to make your own compost tea. You can use certain BeSafe products are all sort of revolve around the introduction of soil improving microorganisms. Somebody's asking if they have 2,000 customers will compost tea. Yeah, it absolutely will work. I think it's probably a little bit of a hassle, Pat, to be able to try to make your own compost tea, to be able to treat 2,000 customers, but at least you're thinking about it. Compost tea is difficult to scale. Compost tea works really great in the niche, but it's difficult to scale for lots of reasons. But for the most part, compost tea is a very good thing. Questions about Wholeganics. Lots of questions about Wholeganics. So Wholeganics, in the interest of not being completely self-promotional, I'll talk about Wholeganics. That is a competitor of BeSafe for the most part, and they have what they call a bionutritional product, and revolves around soil biology and reducing input. So that would be an acceptable way to begin to implement some of these things. Absolutely. The way that a couple of questions on how that actually works. How does introducing products that amplify soil biology or introduce soil biology reduce inputs? We could talk about that all day long, but let me try to simplify it real quick. In terms of nitrogen, when I called for the reduction of that nitrogen, the way the soil food web kind of works, and the way that introducing biology into the system works, is that biology, and for the most part, bacteria will consume your nitrogen. It eats it. It consumes it. And then other members of the soil food web consume the bacteria, for the most part protozoa. Protozoa will consume bacteria, and the waste product is plant-available nitrogen. So when you apply a water-soluble fertilizer to a lawn like urea, a lot of times it will leach. It will, it'll leach away. 50% of it might just, if it rains, it might just kind of go down the drain. But if you apply it alongside a biological input, a lot of times that bacteria will prevent it from leaching right away, and it will kind of slow down the process. So that's a really, really sort of quick explanation as to how that works. It sequesters the nitrogen. Tons of questions, guys. Awesome. How do we distinguish the good organic product companies from the bad? Willis, what time is it in Hawaii right now? Shouldn't you be sleeping? How do we distinguish the good organic product company from the bad? I chose to answer Willis's question because that's been a little bit of an issue in the organic industry in the last, I don't know, we'll just call it 10 years. When that spike in organics happened, say 10 years ago, all of a sudden, like in the coming weeks, we'll be at New England Grows. When I first started doing this kind of deal, however many years ago, it was like every third booth was an organic lawn care product company when I first started. And now that's not the case. There were lots of companies that didn't make it. There's a lot of snake oil out there. I'm certainly not going to name names at all. You have to use your best judgment. And maybe if you want to ask me offline, I'll answer it a little bit more directly too. But it's all about your best judgment. For the most part, the longer a company or somebody's been in the industry, the more reputable they are because they didn't get to where they are by selling crap. So there are certain pioneers of what we've done. I mentioned Chip, Todd Harrington, who's on the line today. He's certainly somebody who's been really, really involved with the promotion and the pioneering of some of the products and things that we're talking about. I'd go with some of those people before I went with some of the newer ones, without saying too much. You have to trust your better judgment, but snake oil has certainly set us back. Snake oil has certainly set our industry or that niche back. Maybe not snake oil, you guys, maybe more claims, unrealistic claims, like apply this and this will happen. And you're like, that ain't going to happen. And then it doesn't. That's turned off many, many consumers because that translates from the product supplier to the lawn care service company to the consumer, and when results don't happen, they cancel, and we all get a sort of a bad reputation. There's a company, I was talking to a larger national lawn service company that was thinking about implementing some of these things, went out and looked at some of the products on the market, went as far as tested them all. So ran tests on what was in the bottle, or as Chip would say, the box, bottle, or bag. One of the products came back as H2O colored brown. That's not going to be helpful. Brown water ain't going to help your lawns too much unless they're really thirsty and you get a lot of it. So it's a challenge to be able to figure out what works and what doesn't. It's up to you to use your best judgment. Kevin, great question. Do I know of any new or improved insecticides or herbicides that are being developed organically? We're lucky, Kevin, that there are people who see opportunity in this. There are large, manufacturing and research companies who see huge opportunity in the traction that niche is gaining and how that niche is going to become the mainstream. So right off the top, and you know some of them, some of them are more acceptable than others. One product we used last year for grub control was a product called Grandivo. For those of you who don't know what Grandivo is, it's a little bit on the expensive side. Hopefully that'll come down a little bit. but Grandivo is a certifiably organic pesticide, still considered a pesticide, but certified organic to control insects, right? So if you want to Google Grandivo, you'll get some great information on that. Some of the herbicides, Fiesta is one that's doing all right, doing pretty well. Not necessarily always certifiably organic because of some of the inputs in it, the chelating agent. But when it comes to Todd, awesome. That's a couple biofungicides. Regalia is one that we used up on our baseball field up in Portland. An actual when you're managing super high visibility turf and there's literally no opportunity to make a mistake. If it's not perfect, you're fired. We transitioned Hadlock's Field in Portland, Maine, where the AA Red Sox play, the Portland Sea Dogs. We transitioned it to organic, and we needed to use beyond just our inoculants to deal with disease. We wanted to get some actual fungicides in there to eliminate. It's 100% bluegrass sod. There's lots of diseases that are going to come and go all the time. Regalia, it was an awesome product. We got great results from it. Plus, I goofed up towards the end of the year, and I got some serious dollar spot because I let up, and the Regalia took care of it. Adios. A couple of people are asking about Adios. Adios is a post-emergent organic herbicide for both broadleaf and grassy weeds. We used a lot of it last year at B-Safe. With varying results, and I'm not abandoning Adios yet at all. There are two versions of Adios. There's a OMRI certified version, and there's a non-OMRI certified version. When it comes to tools in your toolbox, Adios is important. You want a hand can of Adios all the time, especially for those customers who want nothing to do with 2,4-D or any herbicide. The cost is still a little bit of an issue. The fact that you don't want to tank mix it or blanket spray it, it's filled with salts, is a little bit scary. But it works all right. Works pretty good on clover. Results have been 50-50. But we're sticking with it, definitely. Pre-emergence in terms of organics. So for the most part with pre-emergence, Eric, we want to work on soil biology primarily. We want to work on implementing good cultural practices. We want to make sure that we're watering and mowing correctly. We've got a product that we just sort of manipulated to deal with a study that came out of China in regards to crabgrass and how the crabgrass plant produces chemicals that destroy soil biology around it. Repopulating that soil biology is important. And we try to think of dealing with preventative controls with crabgrass on more of less of a product-based approach and more of a sort of an overall approach. But corn gluten is obviously comes immediately to mind. I don't love granular corn gluten as a pre-emergent because there's certainly a nitrogen contradiction there, and you need way too much of it. Corn gluten is an awesome organic fertilizer. A lot of times people ask me about the GMO issue with corn gluten, and that's sort of a little scary for some people. There are liquid corn gluten products out there now. We have one at B-Safe that take the nitrogen out of C&D. Yeah, I've been approaching an hour and 15 minutes here. For those who've got to go ahead. You're not going to offend me. For those of you who want to hang around, please do. Yeah, see, I mentioned the corn, and all of a sudden the GMO questions came up. I don't think there's any way to verify or even think that corn gluten comes from corn that is GMO-free, unfortunately. I don't think that's going to happen. And to some people, that's an important point, right? Liquid corn gluten, we've got a couple of applicators, or I talk to people who use it, and they swear by it. They'll tell you all day long that it works, as well as Dimension, Barricade, any of the chemical pre-emergents. It's a little pricey, and when crabgrass is obviously our biggest enemy. It's hard to deal with it, and it keeps me up at night and has for a long time. Is there a difference between granular and liquid organic fertilizers? Yeah, there really is. Good question, Pat. Granular organic products or fertilizers sometimes have affected the efficacy of our approach because they don't necessarily work right away. So take granular corn gluten again. If you're going to apply granular corn gluten to a lawn that has no soil biology, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because it's water insoluble. The way urea will break down immediately, it's 100% water soluble chemical fertilizer, right? Corn gluten is the exact opposite. It won't break down unless you apply it alongside some biology, or you're applying it to turf that is very, very biologically active. Maggie, do you use corn gluten for annual bluegrass? The old POA question. POA is the enemy of us. POA is tricky because as we try to have as many tools in our toolbox as possible to deal with every particular issue, POA and nutsedge continue to be a little bit of an issue. Yes, corn gluten will work on POA. I believe it's labeled at very high rates. Granularly, it's that nitrogen contradiction is going to cause an issue. There's a couple companies testing the liquid gluten on POA, but I'm not going to be able to speak confidently in telling you that if you apply a liquid gluten, you'll prevent annual bluegrass. Same goes for nutsedge. Nutsedge is another one that, unfortunately, unless you want to get on your hands and knees and start pulling it up for hour after hour, there's not a real good tool in that toolbox for nutsedge. And nutsedge is taken off like crazy. It seems the last few years. Maybe it's just us trying to make it more difficult on ourselves. But in the Mid-Atlantic region, nutsedge is a major, major issue. All right. We're going up to the questions. Lots of questions about compost teas. Compost tea, and Eric asks, what are the various compost teas you use? So I'm going to skip over my promise to not self-promote here, this particular question, Eric. That's why I kind of wanted to wait till the end to do that. Compost teas, in my opinion, although they're great, I mentioned they're difficult to scale. And when you talk about what type, you ask what are the various compost teas that you use. BeSafe has been able to find a way to kind of replicate or create inoculants or product that acts the same exact way compost teas do, with the same exact soil biology, without any of the inconsistencies. Whenever I make compost tea, there's always something in the back of my head saying, I hope this is doing what it's supposed to do. And unless you're actually going to test it under a microscope and figure out, try to quantify what the biology is, you know, you're guessing a little bit. And there are people who've mastered it. There's no doubt about it, and you can master it too. But we've taken a little bit of a different approach, and we've taken the science route, and we can take certain our products are essentially laboratory-created compost teas where the microorganisms have been stabilized and they're dormant, and they'll come out of dormancy when the situation allows for it. That's not to say compost tea isn't something that you could implement and be effective with. It can sometimes be a little bit of a pain in the neck, especially if you're trying to scale it. If Todd is still on, he's going to let this question. The question is, I know Paul Tukey is out of the industry right now, but is he legit? Paul was a legitimate advocate. Paul pushed the envelope pretty far. He's not writing as much as he used to. He turned off as many people as he turned on as a result of pushing that envelope pretty hard. So he's legit. Yeah, he pushes a good amount of information. I used to read him every single day. He's taken another job outside of the advocacy circle. If you read his stuff, for the most part, it's legit, yes. But I think he's, as a result of his desire to push that envelope, he's created a couple of bridges that might be smoldering a little. Was that politically correct enough? Hopefully Paul's not on the line today. Or if he was, we'd say, now we'll unmute him and let him address the group. Here's a good question. And again, it doesn't look like anybody's leaving. So we're going long. If anybody wants to leave, you know, certainly not going to offend me. We're getting on close to an hour and a half. The question is, when switching from chemical to organic lawn control on one lawn, how long can we expect it to take for the organic treatment to create a beautifully ecological, responsible lawn? Leah, you could do it pretty quickly if you've got the inputs ironed out the right way and you know exactly what you're dealing with, and you have the budget to be able to implement a really high-level type plan. You can transition a lawn from chemical to organic overnight, from one day to the next, without without anybody even noticing. That's what we did up in Portland. And you'll have some issues that you'll have to deal with, but with a lot of the science, the way things have changed, and the way we've kind of been able to improve our products, and science keeps getting better and better, you can do it from one day to the next. Don't depend on just the substitution. You can't just say, okay, I used to use a chemical fertilizer here, now I'm going to use an organic fertilizer. That's not going to work. You need to think of it from a much broader perspective and think about soil biology, those principles I talked about, soil biology, natural NPK inputs, biostimulants, chemical-free control products, and then information and education. If you can implement something like that, you can transition something overnight, no problem. It's all subjective, though, don't forget. I mean, some people will look at one lawn and say, that's the worst lawn I've ever seen, while other people will look at it and say, that's the best lawn I've ever seen. So it's an open-ended and sort of dangerous question. I'm going back. Willis answered the question. It was 7:02 in Hawaii. Rise and shine. What's the difference between organic-based products and organic products? Awesome question. Organic-based products aren't organic. Whenever somebody tells you that it's organic-based, they're telling you this is not organic. An organic-based product means it is not organic, period. You can't debate that. Organic-based usually means bridge products. So, for instance, like a fertilizer, Sustain is a great organic-based product where it's a bridge product. It's got natural inputs, but it's also got some urea in it. So you don't want to call that organic. It's not that it's not good. It's not that it won't work well. It's just that you have to be careful with the way you label it. So anything whenever a company says we're organic-based, that's basically saying we aren't organic, but we want you to think we're organic. So when I challenge people and companies who are promoting themselves as environmentally responsible and use those two products we talked about to stop doing that, I'll challenge any company that calls themselves organic-based to cut the crap too, because you're lying. Soy fertilizers are good. Yep. Yep, alongside, make sure you're applying, Matt, make sure you're applying a soy-based fertilizer with some biology. Because soy is, although it's a great fertilizer, it's going to have a hard time breaking down without any biology. Guys, I'm going to wrap up now. There are lots and lots of questions. But I think for the most part, we touched on the important things. Some editorial comments coming in right now, and I at times agree and will disagree with you. I'm going to wrap up. If anybody has any specific questions or they'd like to, thank you, Todd. That means a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're always more. Here's my pitch. If you're interested in trying to take some of the things that we talked about and implementing in your business, we can help you. So Be Safe is a a dealer network of lawn and landscape companies that work together to try to implement organic programs to their customer base and grow their business. And if you're interested in trying to look into that, we're absolutely happy to talk to you. Or if you have any other specific questions about products or inputs or anything else, give us a call anytime. Drop an email to this contact information up there, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining me, guys. And yes, actually, Carlos, I will see you at New England Grows. We'll be there, so feel free to stop by. Hopefully I'll have had less coffee. Thanks, guys. See you later.